The next individual I'd like to call is Governor Gary Johnson. The governor and I have talked about the pledge, and there is one issue that we don't agree upon. But if you don't feel comfortable in signing, that's fine.
I thought I would use this as talking points here.
Sure.
I am Gary Johnson. I'm running for President of the United States. I'm trying to get the Republican nomination to do that. I would like you all to know that I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I've paid for everything that I've had in my life since I've been 17 years old. I started a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque in 1974, and actually in 1994 had 1,000 employees. Electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting. I'd like to think the American dream come true, and it was based on showing up on time and doing what I said I would do for people, doing a little bit more than what I said I would do for people. I sold that business in 1999. No one lost their job, and that business is doing better than ever today. I'm also an athlete, and I think it's important for you to know who I am. And as an athlete, I think a lot of discipline goes along with athletics. A lot of goal setting goes along with athletics. In my lifetime, I've competed in the Ironman Triathlon Hawaii 4 times. And I've actually got to stand on top of the planet, having summited Mount Everest. Now, there are people that say, wow, you conquered Mount Everest. I'm like, no. No, I did not conquer Mount Everest. I got really lucky, and she lifted her skirt and she gave me a peek, and it was really cool. That was my conquering Mount Everest. As governor of New Mexico, I've run for 2 political offices in my life. Governor of New Mexico and getting reelected as governor of New Mexico. I'd never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico. My pledge was to bring a common sense business approach to state government. Best product, best service, lowest price, less government, better. So shrink the size of government. And then the notion that government, when it comes to me as an individual, would empower me as an individual to make choices that I think only I should make and that not the government should make. So in that context, I think I distinguished myself in a couple of categories as governor of New Mexico. One was I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. I had thousands of line item vetoes as governor of New Mexico. Putting that into context, that may have been more vetoes than the other 49 governors in the country combined. It really did say no to growing government. It said, and I took on this debate and I took on this discussion regularly about the notion of how much money are we spending and what are we getting for the money that we're spending? And a couple of recent pieces of legislation that I would have vetoed would have been, one, Republicans made it against the law for individuals to play poker online. I would have vetoed that legislation. 10 million Americans that play poker online. You can play poker online for pennies on the evening. There are paraplegics that play poker, that this is their passion, and they're denied that by the government. They're denied that by Republicans. I don't think that should be a choice when it comes to government. And I have a feeling that it was driven from a lobbying standpoint. I have a feeling that it was driven by the fact that the casinos didn't want online gaming. So you can go into a casino and lose several $100s, if not thousands of dollars, as opposed to pennies. And then another piece of legislation, and it actually may not be legislation, but rules or regulations, and that is that right now, one of my passions is mountain biking. I love mountain biking. I'm being denied access to public trails on public lands, and yet horses are allowed on those same public trails, and the excrement that goes along with horses, and I'm not allowed as a mountain biker. So both of those instances, these are passions that we have as human beings, and we're being denied these passions because government seems to think they know better than you and I. And there's a personal responsibility that goes along with playing poker online. There's a personal responsibility that goes along with being in the backcountry and not littering the backcountry and not lighting fires and a stewardship that goes along with being in the backcountry. But just two examples of things that I wouldn't have had anything to do with as government, believing in personal responsibility that goes along with that. Cut taxes, fees, and regulations which are destroying our small businesses and jobs. 3 weeks ago, they came out with a report on all the presidential candidates and their jobs history. How did they do when it came to jobs? Well, there were more jobs created in New Mexico than any other state, and this was of the declared candidates, and this was 3 weeks ago. Since Rick Perry has now joined, statistically, he would be a little bit better than I was on jobs. But what I said when this report came out was, you know what? I wasn't responsible for one single job in the state of New Mexico. Government doesn't create jobs, the private sector does. But what I did do in New Mexico is I vetoed legislation that would have made it a worse business environment. I did that. And so business went to sleep at night in New Mexico knowing that things weren't going to get worse because Johnson was going to veto it. And because of rules and regulations, because I controlled all of state government, rules and regulations got a lot better. And they got a lot better on a daily basis. So in fact, I think I contributed to an environment that did really create a lot of jobs in New Mexico. As President of the United States, I am pledging to submit a balanced budget that first year that I am in office. And by balanced budget, that means cutting federal spending by 43%. I believe that we're on the verge of a financial collapse. I believe that it's going to be a monetary collapse. I believe that it's the bond market that's going to collapse, and it's simply due to the fact that there's no repaying $14 trillion in debt, given the fact that we're going to rack up another $9 trillion over the next 8.5 years. It's not possible. And so people are going to say, we're not going to buy any more government bonds. And if you saw it written, over the last year, the Federal Reserve was buying up to 70% of our treasuries, just printing the money out of thin air and buying treasuries. The rest was actually being purchased by individuals or foreign governments, if you will. Not a bad thing. But the collapse is when there's no appetite, zero appetite for these bonds. And these bonds are going to mature, and when they mature, if they're not rolled over, if people don't buy them, if somebody doesn't buy them, and the government's the only entity that's going to do that, that's the collapse. And the collapse is, and it's the worst thing of all the money that we've saved up our entire lives and worked hard to save up is not going to be worth a thing. This is something in world history that has replayed itself many times. The Weinmark in Germany in the mid-20s, 120,000 Weinmarks bought a home in Berlin in the mid-20s. A year later, that same 120,000 Weinmarks bought a loaf of bread. That's what happened to the currency in Germany. That's what's happened to many currencies, and it's going to happen here unless we balance the federal budget. So the plus here, and this was my experience as governor of New Mexico, good government was easy. It wasn't hard, it was easy. And I'm not saying that balancing the federal budget is going to be easy, but we can do it. And in the context of balancing the federal budget, we're talking about Medicaid, we're talking about Medicare, we're talking about military spending. For starters, Social Security, not cutting Social Security, but Social Security, very simply, is a system that needs to take in more money than what it pays out. And so to do that without raising taxes, we could raise the retirement age, we could have a means testing, we could change the escalator built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation index. These are problems that we can address. We can do this, but New Hampshire vote. You've got a message that you can send, that this is the message we want to send, that we want to really make this happen. So as President of the United States, I propose a budget to balance the budget in 2013. You can say, well, they'll never balance the budget. It's not possible. I'll just say to you, I promise to veto expenditures that exceed balancing the budget. I promise to do that. You can say, well, Congress will then just override your veto. Yes, they can just override that veto, but I have to tell you, that budget is going to come closer to being balanced than if you're going to elect a president that's going to balance the budget over a 15 or 20-year period, because that's the only prudent way that we can get it done. Well, that just simply means kicking the can down the road. I propose scrapping the entire federal tax system and replacing it with the fair tax. And if you haven't looked up fair tax, look up fairtax.org. It is what it implies. It's fair. Everybody would pay. We're going to replace all federal taxation with one federal consumption tax. Everybody would pay. We would do away with the IRS. We would do away with the income tax. We would do away with corporate tax. We would do away with business-to-business tax. By doing away with the corporate income tax, aren't we going to create tens of millions of jobs in this country overnight? Because why would you start up, grow, nurture a business anywhere in the world but in the United States, given that kind of environment? Cut the size of government at all levels. Obviously, we have to cut government spending at all levels. I'm going to skip number 4, secure our borders. Become energy independent within 8 years. Look, and when it comes to pledges for me, I don't want to sign any pledge that there's any question about me and my actually wanting to carry this out. So become energy independent within 8 years. If that means oil, I don't think that's possible. I think that we should have free market approaches to energy. And when it comes to oil, I think that we should be drilling responsibly on our own soil. And if we were to do that, drill responsibly, search for the oil that we have within our boundaries, in 15 years, it is very possible that we could be at 50% production of our consumption, which is very significant, and it's something that we should do. So if energy independence means oil, I just don't, that's not going to happen when it comes to oil. And when it comes to natural gas, when it comes to the green side of this equation, when it comes to nuclear, these are areas that are, I think, and I'll skip green space here, but when it comes to natural gas, when it comes to nuclear, these are huge, abundant sources of energy that when you look at energy independence, if you're going to look at a net production loss, coal, we're not building any new coal-fired plants, energy independence. Forcefully, faithfully, and forcefully uphold, follow, protect the United States Constitution. Absolutely. Securing the borders by using whatever means are necessary. Border governor of New Mexico. I think I know something about immigration. Immigration, legal, illegal immigration. I think immigration is really a good thing. And so when it comes to immigration, I think that we should make it as easy as possible for someone that wants to come into this country and work to get a legal work visa. Not a green card, not citizenship, but a legal work visa that would entail a Social Security card and a background check. Now, if we enact the fair tax, everyone is going to pay when it comes to the fair tax. Everybody. No one avoids paying the fair tax. And that's the problem right now with our tax system, is that we have loopholes. There are corporations, there are individuals that avoid paying tax altogether. That goes away when it comes to a fair tax. But back to immigration. Make it as easy as possible for individuals that want to come into this country to work. When it comes to building a fence across 2,000 miles of border, when it comes to putting the National Guard across 2,000 miles of border, in my opinion, this is a whole lot of money spent with very little, if any, benefit whatsoever. When it comes to the 11 million illegal immigrants that are here in this country right now, what's the main reason that we have 11 million illegal immigrants in this country? The reason is that when Reagan set up his amnesty period in the 80s, he coupled that with putting government in charge of quotas, matching up businesses with labor. That was a complete breakdown from day one. We're here decrying government on all levels, and yet government is going to be able to secure the borders. Government is going to be able to determine which businesses need help and what the help is coming in. It doesn't work. It's a breakdown. And it was a breakdown from day one. So you live in Mexico. You can't get a work permit. You can't get one. And yet you know that if you can get across the border, even illegally, that you can get a job because you have dozens of friends and family that live in the United States, and that's what you end up doing. You end up crossing illegally, and it's not businesses that are to blame because for the most part, illegal immigrants produce fake documentation. So taxes actually get withheld. They never get collected on. So document the 11 million workers. Set up a grace period where we can document the 11 million illegal immigrants. And then touching on the drugs and the drug violence, don't discount for a minute how much of the border, how many of the problems around the border have to do with the prohibition of drugs. Since 1999, I have advocated legalizing marijuana. Legalize marijuana and arguably 75% of the border violence with Mexico goes away because that's the estimate of the drug cartels' activities that are engaged in the trade of marijuana. I would ask you all to look at this issue if you haven't looked at this issue before and see if you don't come to the conclusion that I have, and that is that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related, and that's not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that ought to be the focus. 28,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years. This is prohibition. These are disputes that are being played out with guns rather than the courts. So if you want to get at the root of this issue, if you want to get at the root of this problem, start by legalizing marijuana and watch how quickly things become much, much better. Thank you very much for allowing me here to be here this afternoon. It is a beautiful venue. I'm putting my chips on the table here in New Hampshire. I believe, going back to, I guess, Eugene McCarthy, that New Hampshireites, you all cast your votes, you all take the time to meet and greet and listen to what candidates have to say. And from a candidate's perspective, how could things be any better than that? How could you ask for anything more than that? So what you end up doing, and I'm speaking the obvious, is you end up vetting candidates for the rest of the country as to whether or not the candidate advances from here. I'm hoping to advance from here. I'm hoping to have it be a must-have ticket that in South Carolina, here's what they said about him in New Hampshire, well, we better go listen to what he has to say as a basis of his result in New Hampshire.
We have time for one quick question, Governor, very quickly, if we don't mind. Right?
Governor, I heard you say that you couldn't agree with the promise to achieve energy independence in 8 years. But you're only being asked by signing the pledge to work tirelessly to achieve that. Not that you would necessarily, you had to achieve it.
No, I see that. I see that. No, I don't object to that. I don't object to it, and I would work tirelessly to make that happen, but it's not possible when it comes to oil, and I just want to point that out. It's not possible.
But you would promise to work tirelessly to achieve it.
So should you sign a pledge to work tirelessly for something that isn't going to happen? I'm talking about oil now. That's all I'm just throwing out.
Thank you. Any other question, maybe just address them with the governor one-on-one, because we've got just a couple other candidates who have asked and waited very patiently to speak, so I just want to thank everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.